This program features live coverage of an African safari and may include animal kills and carcasses. Viewer discretion is advised.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Djuma Private Game Reserve, where we have a looks like a whole rank of impalas, a whole group, and two males playing, fighting there. Probably it's all about practice early morning, where you can see the beautiful rise sky showing just only its beauty of the 1st of January. News to everyone, and welcome aboard to your very own safari through the African bush. Good morning, everybody. We're here at Djuma Private Game Reserve this morning. We begin looking at the impalas. We're actually right here on the open area as usual, quarantine. And just to see what they're about and what it's been about all night. Looks like they're just taking their easy time, where I believe they haven't actually been disturbed. As you can see, all of these males marching straight towards the herd, and this is how they're going to be probably operating around here. My name's Andrew. On cam this morning I have Simon. See his thumbs up. So we cam, this is actually, we thought it's actually good time to start. Look around in the open area. Once you find impalas, all relax, and then you know that if it's anything around them that maybe they haven't spotted, whatever it is. You can see the beautiful rise and a bit of a cloud in the east coming up. Temperature for the day, 24 degrees Celsius and 76 Fahrenheit, which I believe maybe during the course of the day it's going to be one of these Scorch Day and New Year's Day, January. And remember to talk to us. We're coming to you from different location from Africa. Remember to talk to us on the very young age. You can still use kids questions at WildEarth.tv, but also you can use on Twitter #WildEarth, on YouTube channel at FC, as well as WildEarth.tv/an explorer. We would like to hear from you as we take you through to this wildness live this morning. But yeah, my mission is actually just to check again the western border. I'm going to check the dam, Kalahari Dam, if there's anything there. And then otherwise I'm going to check far in the west. Because last time, I know 3 days ago, the Nkuhuma was seen across the border, and there was no update about them yesterday. And then of course, we don't know what's happening there. If it's a chance they came back into Djuma, or maybe the Northern Pride. Now we're talking about Dalamati Pride, where they maybe sometimes make their way into the property. Until then, we'll probably have to find out. Yeah, we've seen a few males that they're actually matching. Color. You're very right, actually. You're just like me. It's my favorite. Antelopes. And just the way they do, the way they interact each other's, and in herds. But they, it's kind of like family reunion, where now when the male's politely enough to dominate male this time of year, he would allow all of these bachelor groups to come to join the herd party where there's no breeding right now. Some are very strictly that they won't allow any male close to their females. But it's all about trust when you don't trust nobody. Here were these two young males, they're practicing their energy. Probably the next right in season, which is probably anyway beginning of winter again. And now many of the females, they have their baby running around with them. Impala, they are medium antelope out here. So they are one of the McDonald's, we call them, but because of the marking on their back. So the tail and the stripe on the side, the black marking pointing down from the very top. So it forms an M. And that is a guide we thought to stand for McDonald's. But then it's upside down wimpy, which I think they don't know about that. They wouldn't like us to call them that. They're still in the wood, some of them. Some of them are all scattered around here. They're busy scanning for safety. So I'm gonna carry on, look for anything else for everyone. While I'm doing this, I'm gonna be sending you over to Lauren at the dam.
Good morning and a very happy new year. No, your world hasn't turned upside down. We were just admiring the moon in the reflection of the water at Treehouse Dam. My name is Lauren, and once again I have Davy on camera, and I hope you all have a fantastic start to 2021. There's not too many sore heads out there, and you can enjoy a bumble through the bush with a slot here in lots of different locations across Africa. Now, the hyena den was not active. I have to say I'm sad. I'm very sad, but once again, it's shifted. The heat is phenomenal. And I imagine they've just gone a little bit more nocturnal. So we've just missed them by a matter of half an hour or an hour. And that is how they are going to sort of avoid the intense heat, by just shifting their daily patterns ever so slightly. But what that means is that we are too late when we go out. But I believe the temperature is going to come back down again tomorrow. I think the entire landscape out here, including the animals and the people in it, are going to breathe a big sigh of relief. And hopefully the hyenas will be more active. So I don't really have any plans for today other than to bumble. Since I can't get my hyena spots, I may try for the other spots, as I believe Andrew is going to look for the lions. It's been a long time since we've had a proper sighting with the Nkahoma Pride, the entire Pride, and the boys. They haven't really crossed onto Djuma in a number of weeks. So that's Andrew's mission, I believe, and our mission will be to look for some spotted cats. Cameron, you have just blown my mind with that. Yes, why did I not open with that line? Why? Yes, it's a new year and a new way to look at the moon. Upside down. The ripple's been caused, of course, by the ginormous hippo that's inside Treehouse Dam. Thank you for that statement. Yes, I think many of us are glad to see the back of 2020 so we can all go into 2021 together. And hopefully it's going to be a good year for all. It's like glass. The dam is so still, other than the ripples. The hippo thinks that you don't know that he's there. And he's not giving anything away by being underwater. But in fact, the ripples give him away. You know there's something in that body of water, even if you don't see him immediately. Oh, we know you're there. Oh, and back down again we go. So Davi, are you ready to bumble? Okay. Now, it seems like Kalamba may have crossed back into Buffelshoek. It's been a while since she was in Buffelshoek. And I know that both Kuchava and Kanyeni were on Cheetah Plains yesterday, which we cannot traverse. The only one that I'm missing is Sabui. I'm not sure of her location. I'm desperate to have a sighting with her and her 2 babies. So that's why we're going to scratch down south and see if she's possibly on Chitwa, or, you never know, she may have come into our property from the southern boundary. Davi, have you met Sabui's cubs?
Once.
You have? Okay. Well, they're much bigger since then. And it'll be lovely to spend time with them, especially as a trio, a whirlwind of spots. I just want to check that no one has walked along this road. Well, of course someone has, but you know, not the animals that I'm looking for. The sun's already extremely high in the sky. Hamby, I would love to know how many leopards there are in Djuma right now. I have no idea. I would love to know, but what I think you're referring to is how many leopards do we see in Djuma? Because leopards move. Djuma's a very small property. It's almost like a box. So how many are on Djuma right now? I have no idea. I'd love to know, and I'd love to know their location. But in general, the sort of leopards whose territories include Djuma are Tandy. She comes in from the eastern side. She is who we now call our queen after Karula. We have Tingana, who appears to have gone a little bit more nomadic, but he is spending time on Djuma. Djuma used to be, well, the core of his territory for a while. Kalamba. Her territory is in the northern sector of Djuma, but she appears to be sort of shifting and now taking a little chunk of the east. Shudulu. Shudulu is our Duchess of the West, and I think that gives the game away, but she comes in from the west. Not often and not far, but she pushes in from the west. Mr. Hukamuri used to also push in from the west, but we do believe that's slightly changed. And apparently Molwati's territory is Djuma. But that one's a bit of a mystery. We saw him scent marking on Djuma the other day on the northern boundary. We just rarely see his tracks, and we rarely see him. So those are the main leopards that we see here in Djuma. So I'm going to keep bumbling south, see what else I can find, and I'm going to send you across to Andrew with an elephant.
Good luck, Lauren. So here we got a bull elephant, probably drinking there. You can see there's water coming out of the mouth. It's probably one of these water holes that actually excavate all themselves. Now the water over the night has been well developed in that little well. It's actually decent male here we got. And we're talking about males that they always separated from the breeding herd. We're talking about male like them. But you're looking at his size. For now, it looks like it's only him. It happens the other members around. Could be the other brothers, other males. When they're separate, they're a lot free and they have their own time to actually feed around in this area where it's actually low down here. This is one of the drainage line where, it's still quite great for a temperature on animals like this. So it's still kind of very cool. And it's the best place to spend the whole probably day. See how he controls his trunk. How he's probably cleaning some of the water. If it's dirty, he's just gonna blow it out again. So, wait for nice fresh water to develop there, because it's kind of a sandy where they prefer to develop these little pens. And the grass is still due, as you can see, and it applies so great for all animals, not only elephants, but mixed feeders or grazers. When they eat the grasses with dew like this, it makes them spend a lot of time not to wander around for water, because the grass is already moisture. Normally big elephants like this, more especially male. So they weigh anything from over so they normally weigh up to 5.5, 6 tons. And I'm going to take another time here to see what he's going to be doing in the next time. I'm going to be sending you over to JP with his beautiful sky.
Good morning to Tswalu, and Happy New Year to all the viewers. We're at the moment just staring over into an easterly direction, watching the sun coming up over the Koranenberg Mountains. In between us is a number of dune streets as well as dune crest. And we're also just listening to the number of birds that are calling this morning. My name is JP LaRue, and behind the camera we've got Craig. Our plan for this morning is to go a little bit further south and west. We would love to go and follow up on one of the hard pans, which is known as kalkpan, and see what animals come in to come and drink in that area. Seeing that it's a nice and cool morning, we're also keeping our eyes open for a number of the smaller mammal species, which we do find that is generally more restricted to the cooler parts of the day. In the meanwhile, we would just like to encourage you to enjoy that beautiful sunrise, which is our first sunrise for the year. Good morning, Linda. That's precisely the same thought that's going through my mind at the moment. So every year, with the start of the rising sun, on the first day of the year, I start a new birding list. And I always will stop at somewhere where the sun is rising, listen and look. So for this year, my first bird for the year will be the Bokmakiri, which is a member of the bush Shrike family. So if you have a look over here, in general coloration pattern, olive green and yellow color with a very distinct black breastband coming across the throat. And this bird gets its name from the onomatopoeic sound that it produces, which sounds like Bokmakiri, which he says. So for the viewers that are familiar with the lowveld, you might be also more familiar with one of his close relatives, which is a grey-headed bush shrike.
Thanks, JP. So our bull elephant has moved from that drinking spot. It's actually now making its way a western direction, but we've still got a visual over here. So a lot of time you'll be behind the females, even though they're far, but it's so an intelligent animal that wherever he is right now, you're able to know where the other member is, because they always kind of communicate through sound. But he just actually went to the perfect spot where it's shade. When you look there, you can see that he's in a shade where the sun is not through in there yet. You'll see his ears flapping. This is all about cooling off. So it works like a fan off the veins, so that you will be, the temperature will drop a bit, the rest of the body when he does this. So what a way of air conditioning yourself. So I'm gonna stay and put, probably see if the other member is joining.
A warm welcome to a beautiful day here at andBeyond in Ngala, and we are so spoiled with a big male lion early on in the morning. You can see how this one's just lifting his head to smell. This is also the one that we saw yesterday, and we were really hoping that the Pride will come and join up with him, because last night he was calling for the rest of the Pride, but they haven't come and joined up yet. But I'll show everyone on the map where we are. So I'm Nikki, I'm going to be your ranger this morning, and on camera we have BK. So just on this little map here, I wanted to show you where this, so we started off driving from this side, and eventually we found him right over here. Now the rest of the Pride was calling from this area here, and maybe they're still on their way to try and join up with where they are. So this is east, this is west, south is down here at the bottom, and north at the top. So he's right here, and the Pride was calling from the east, so hopefully they'll come and join up at some stage. It is going to be a warm day, so maybe there's a chance that the rest of the Pride would only join up a little bit later when it cools down this late afternoon or maybe in the evening. But if you look at this male's face, doesn't he tell you a lot of stories because of all the scars? I do love this particular male lion and the different colors of the mane. You'll see there's that very blondish color around the ear, and then that patch of dark behind the head. And also look under his eye. Doesn't that look like a cut? Probably as him and his brother were fighting, or maybe the rest of the Pride as they were fighting for over a carcass. or maybe even a territorial dispute. Catherine, with male lions in particular, their mane will start growing at the age of 1.5 years. And they'll have like this fluff under their neck. And it's probably only going to be at the age of like 4.5, 5 years where the bottom part of the mane is fully developed. Oh, he's just probably going to go and lie down. And this could be him. I mean, this could be him for the whole morning, unless there's something that grabs his attention, or maybe even, as we mentioned, the pride, if they would start contact calling towards him. But it will take up to 6.5 years for a male lion to have a fully developed mane like the one that we are looking at right now. You can see it's very like underneath, so it's normally like the bottom up to 4.5 years. And then the top, you see from the ear, from one ear to the other, like that section there, probably from 4.5 years onwards. Some, it also depends on the genetics. Some lions take longer time to develop the mane, while others takes a bit of a shorter time. Susan, I agree with you. He is a gorgeous animal, and also very majestic. I mean, there's only a few animals where you can get such a sense of awe, especially being closer towards them. And I mean, like a lion like this, the last thing you want to do is probably be on foot. But from a vehicle and giving him a bit of distance and just seeing him in his natural behavior without disturbing him is quite a majestic animal. Now I know why they call them the king of the jungle. There were some francolins that were alarm calling in the back. You'll probably be able to hear them. And as soon as the alarm called, he immediately just opened his eyes a bit to have a look. Marianne, at the moment, there could be two potential prides. So the one pride that we know as Birmingham Pride, so the one with the white lines, and then the other pride is the one known as the Birmingham Breakaway. I mean, there are other prides that occasionally come onto the reserve, and I mean, at any given point in time, there could be 4 different prides on the reserve. But at the moment, if you had to ask me, I think there'll probably only be 2. On the far western side, the initial pride was the Birmingham Pride, and then eventually they started splitting up and it became the Birmingham Breakaway Pride, and the pride that we now know with the white lines in it. And they are the ones that are most often seen on the reserve. But at any given point in time, there could be at least 4 different prides on Ngala. I'm just enjoying the birds so much. You'll hear there's some of the francolins calling. Might hear even a magpie shrike in the distance. And the area where this lion eventually ended up is quite a big open area. And it's not too far from where we saw him the other day. Now I'm just thinking maybe as he was looking out for the rest of the pride, eventually decided, like nice and open patch, there is some shade here as it starts warming up a little bit later, to eventually just see some of the trees here in the back. See, like that one right in the middle of the screen. Might even find that this lion, as it warms up, will just move to into that cover and spend the whole day there. Now, as we mentioned yesterday, lions are pretty lazy animals, and sometimes they can sleep up to 20 hours a day. Pete, there's so many sightings that I would be looking forward to, but I mean, what a way to start the year 2021. So I also want to just mention to all our viewers a happy new year, and I hope everyone will have a blessed year and just be able to participate in all these live drives and see what we can find this year. But definitely lions, I'm sure being able to find some lion cubs and spending time with them and see how they grow up. And also, I mean, this was like late on the year, maybe towards May, June, we might even find some wild dogs, and hopefully there'll be some wild dogs in the den. Leopards, being able to see new leopard cubs. I mean, it's an exciting new year with a lot of probably exciting things that are going to happen. So just excited for the whole year to see what it brings. It's incredible that this lion's color contrasts the green grass around it, but he blends in so well. Like, if from a distance, if he was lying down, we would really struggle to see him. We were really lucky that as we were coming down this road, he was sitting with his head up. But a lot of the time, now imagine that shade at the
Okay. Good morning. Welcome back to Tswalu. We're still on our way, making our way over towards one of the pans that we would like to go and have a look at. In the meanwhile, we're just going to talk and drive for a short little while. Oh, here's something interesting that we can have a look at. We might have shown this to you before, but right over here we can see where a wildebeest bull that has his territory was actually marking his territory. So firstly, there's soil that's been disturbed by him pawing it and then rolling in it. And then we can also see the pellets, or the dung pellets, that has been created, left behind by this wildebeest. We also might have mentioned in one of the previous shows that they have another strategy of marking, and that is by using a gland underneath the eye, which is known as a pre-orbital gland. And here we can see some of that sticky secretion that has been left behind, and also as he's been progressively marking over here in the last few years and months, as that he's set it up a territory in this area, this has been smoothly worn down. And quite often we find that it's always close by to a shady little spot where they do this underneath the trees. So one of the other things that often happens over here as well is that when wildebeest comes and rest up here, they end up snorting. And we find that they've got a relationship with a specific fly species, which is known as a Nasal Bot Fly, not butt fly, as it's incorrectly heard by somebody before, and which led to quite an alarm. So what this fly will do is it will go up into the cavity of a wildebeest. It will then go and sit very close by to the nasal cavity in the brain, but it doesn't go into the brain or anything. It doesn't affect the wildebeest. And then eventually it will hatch there. They will snort it out, and we find that the fly larvae will then dig into the ground and then continue to the next part of its life cycle. And when the wildebeest comes back, it will at some point affect it again. Once again, this is not a negative relationship. It doesn't harm it in any way. It just simply uses the wildebeest to go from one part to the next part of its life cycle. We also see quite often with the closer relatives of wildebeest, species such as hartebeest and Sabi, quite often snorting, and that specific nasal bot fly also affects those animals as well. So in the meanwhile, what we're going to do is we're going to continue driving on, get to our pan as quickly as possible, and see if there's any animals coming in. Good morning, Alison. There's a number of reasons why they do that. Firstly, they do it sometimes to demarcate territories, if it's a species that does hold territories. Otherwise, it also acts like a social media feed. It provides information about the status of an individual, the well-being of the individual, the reproductive status of that individual, and it is also believed that even mood of animals can be determined by that. We also find it that animals use scent so that they can maintain contact with one another. We quite often find that elephant bulls, for example, will deposit scents on the sides of branches from their when they're in must. And that will also act as a warning to other bulls in the area that they should best avoid that area. And they actually can identify individuals by means of scent as well. And a young bull, for example, will know that they must rather avoid that male at that moment because he's bigger, he's stronger, and he's most likely going to kill them. We also see that females will produce scents in forms of urine. Some species do it in saliva. Some does it in special glands, which might range from pre-orbital glands, glands between the feet. And we even find that males can use that for tracking down females that are in estrus, so they can determine if a female is in estrus. One of the things that we often see with species such as wild dog, if there's a female that's in estrus and she urinates on that spot, especially the alpha female, that dominant alpha male will then directly come and urinate on top of that spot so that other males can't detect that she's in estrus. So just a few interesting things about scent. It's a very well-developed mechanism in most animals. We find that animals have an organ that's called the Jacobson's organ, which is in the upper part of the palate, which can analyze scent. It's very well-developed in most animals. And we also find that even humans have that, although it's very weakly developed, because we most likely lost our ability of smell. We also find that reptiles also have incredibly good ability of scent, using scent. They too have a special Jacobson's organ. You'll often find that they will also flick their tongue out to taste the air and pick up scent particles. And then that will be put in these little pits in the Jacobson's organ. And that will analyze things such as, is it a female that's in estrus, or it will analyze things such if it is maybe a food item that it can follow, and by just constantly following, it will detect. Some other interesting things about scent markings which I can think of. One of my favorites is actually African civet, where they will actually drag their anal gland on an object. So quite often we find that we do have an alpha male, alpha female. So it's quite often with monogamous animals, which is cooperative breeders, which means that they have helpers around. But then with a matriarch, it's normally a society where there's a dominant female that leads a group. And classic examples of matriarchal groups is African elephant, where there's a dominant cow, which is normally the oldest and wisest of all the cows, and she will lead her daughters and associated young. Coming back to that African civet that we were discussing earlier and its ability to actually deposit scents, these guys will... Just 1 second, I just want to see what is going on there. There's something that's moving through the bush here. Now coming back to that scent, with the African civet. That scent that they were producing, or the chemical that they were producing, was often harvested, and then it would be used for refining of perfumes and fixing floral notes in perfumes. Coming back onto a bird that we've just seen over here. It's a female redback shrike, so it's not as beautifully colored as a male, which has normally got a very bright red back and a prominent black stripe through the eye. Very interesting bird in terms of migration. These birds quite often migrate 10,000-12,000 kilometers into South Africa from Europe, so we refer to them as Palearctic migrants or long-distance migrants, compared to those shorter-distance migrants such as the intra-Africa migrant, which only migrates within Africa. What I do find fascinating about them is that they're actually site faithful, and they return year after year to precisely the same tree. So they basically come back to the tree that they left over here around by March and April, and then they return again by September to the same spot again. I find it phenomenal that a bird can navigate and orientate itself to such a degree that it can come back to the same spot. Some of the ways that they do it is some bird species will use Earth's magnetism, some species will use position of sun. Smaller bird species sometimes use polarized light as well as the sun or stars, even in some cases of nocturnal migrants, to orientate themselves. And then some birds will also use the large continental land masses, for example, a coastline, to migrate. And we find that when they do get into areas which they're familiar with, one of the last cues that they will use to orientate them to home in onto that specific spot that they are looking for is scent. And that's quite amazing how you can use scent even to locate an area that you are familiar with. So there's a few other strategies that birds can also use in terms of migration patterns, which we find in South Africa. The other is the altitudinal migrant, which is predominantly birds that migrate between the higher central plateau and the low veld region of South Africa and the coastal regions of South Africa. This normally happens in the winter, when winter conditions on the high veld or on the plateau is too severe for them and that there's too little food. Then they make their way down to warmer climatic conditions. And then lastly, we also get birds that are partial migrants, where part of the population will leave and the other part will remain. Good morning, Tandi, and welcome to the show. To answer your question, it's well over 10,000 species. And for South Africa, we're probably very close to 980 plus species at the moment. What we're going to do from here is we're going to start moving on towards where we want to get for our waterhole, and we'll be doing a little bit of talking while we're driving. If you want to go down that road. Good morning, Eddie, and welcome to the show. And you are right, it's an amazing landscape, especially with the contrast of vegetation structures. And also that we've got 5 different habitat types which we can operate in. And we also find the Koranenberg Mountains, the dunes, the dune fields. All of these add to the beauty and the uniqueness of landscape. The little place where I would like to go for this morning is a pan, as mentioned earlier. It's approximately another 2-3 kilometers away from us. So while we're keeping on driving, making our way to the pan, we're going to hand you over to Nikki, who's currently viewing lions.
So we just heard earlier on that another male was calling, and we made our way, and it's this brother of the one we saw earlier on. Now you can see his mane is a lot lighter in color in comparison to the one that we just saw. And also that he doesn't have as many scratches on his face as his brother. I'm just hoping, like as we're sitting here, it's still early part of the morning, that this one will possibly roar. Now, often after a bit of rain, these lions need to go and mark their territory again, because all their scent is washed off, so they'll go and they can travel quite far distances, sometimes up to 10, maybe 12 kilometers, especially here in Ngala. Something's caught his attention. And I wonder where the rest of the pride would be, because I thought maybe he would be with the pride, but it seems to me that both these brothers have separated from the pride. And there were some tracks earlier on one of the roads, so hopefully we'll be able to track them down and see where they are.
We're going to find action. Good morning and welcome back to Tswalu. We're still making our way towards our pan. We'll be there in the next few minutes. I'm really hoping to see quite a few animals and birds coming in to drink. As we are also driving, we're always constantly looking out for tracks. So you learn very quickly to track from a vehicle, which is a very helpful aid in detecting which species of animals is within the area. A question that I often get asked by guests is, how do I notice animals while driving? It's actually very simple. So when we scan for animals, we start scanning from our right-hand side towards our left-hand side, which is against the normal way of reading. And that way you trick your brain to take in the most detail. Otherwise, if you scan from left to right, you actually lose a lot of detail. We also teach ourselves to actually start looking in different areas. For example, in the heat of the day, we'll actually look in shade, because that's most likely where animals are going to lie up. And the early cooler parts of the morning, we tend to focus on sunny spots, as we know that animals would also like to use a little bit of sun to heat up their bodies before they go active. Another trick that we have learned is actually to start looking through the vegetation instead of at the vegetation. So the moment that you start doing that, you actually start picking up animals behind the bush, as our brain is actually programmed to stop to the nearest point of the object. And good morning, Sarah. The easiest animal to track is probably a giraffe. However, it can be pretty tricky as well, depending on the type of habitat and the terrain and the soil type which the animal will move in. If I have to think what is the most difficult animal to track, it's probably a pangolin. Some of the easiest tracks which we can identify is giraffe, buffalo, lion, elephant, obviously. And then some of the trickiest tracks of all is the scrub hare. And for some reason, that's a track that has tripped up many a good tracker on assessment, because it often looks like a number of different tracks depending on how it registered in the soil. Oh, we've got some helmeted guinea fowls in front of us. They're just running off to the side there. We'll go a little bit forward, see if we can find them. There we go. They're moving, and they're keeping on moving away. There's coming back, the birds that you saw over there, helmeted guinea fowls, fairly common species of game bird in South Africa. And with guinea fowls, we find that they're actually very good indicators of potential threats in the area. So when they do alarm call, we do focus on their alarms calls, see what they're doing, and quite often that will be an indication if there's a threat in the area. We can also ask ourselves, is a guinea fowl calling from a tree or is it calling from the ground? Quite often when they are pursued by ground predators, they rather go up in trees, and when they are pursued by birds of prey, they tend to go and hide underneath the vegetation rather than to go in a tree where they can be vulnerable. So I'm just going to, the wrong little road that I took here. I'm just going to turn around. Good morning, Minamu. Let me quickly think, what is my favorite predatory bird? I'm definitely going to put it on as a Peregrine Falcon, because it's one of the fastest flying birds on the planet. They believe that they can reach speeds well in excess of 380 kilometers per hour. And I would also say a crowned eagle, which is my other favorite. And they specialize in hunting primates quite often. They're really, really impressive birds. And we find that they... Oh, where is he? Just focus on him first, please. Oh, Craig has just seen a bird that he wants to point out to us. Ah, there he goes. We're just going to see if we can reposition and find him. So crowned eagles, they often hunt primates as well. And I quite often see them above a forest of the area where I live in the Lowveld. Yeah, he flew off. And then definitely the small little pygmy falcon is another one of my favorite birds of prey, just because they're so cute. Good morning, leopard lover. To answer your question, that I've never had that happening to me. However, it does seem if it's something that does happen with East Africa with cheetahs, which tend to hop onto vehicles. As professional guides, we actually don't encourage animals to come or climb onto vehicles. And generally, as long as guests are sitting still and we're not breaking the shape or the outline of a vehicle and we're not leaning out or shouting at animals, they're not going to react to the vehicle in any way. I've had elephants chasing me, but luckily they don't get into vehicles. But also what we do is we generally look at the behavior of the animal. If it's telling us that it's not happy with our presence, we tend to actually move off and give it more space. So generally as a strategy that I follow myself, is I'll provide the animal with quite a fair amount of space, stop, encourage the use of binoculars, viewing the animal, seeing what it's doing, determining what is its mood, and then from there I will position my vehicle in such a way that I do not block that animal off from its path of movement. I don't cut it off in terms of any escape route. And I also provide myself with an escape route. And once again, if I feel that I'm overstaying my welcome in terms of the animal being unhappy with us, we just rather move on. Here we are. We've eventually arrived at Kalkpan, the pan which I was telling you about earlier on. It's the most water I've seen in Kalkpan in the last few years, and it's also the greenest that I've seen the vegetation around this pan. I'm just going to quickly point out something before it flies off. In the distance there's a vulture that's sitting up perched in a tree. Craig is just going to quickly get the camera on that and we'll tell you a little bit about them before we focus on what's going on around the pan. This is one of our largest vulture species. This is known as a leopard-faced vulture. If you can see, it's got a bare skin on its head, if we focus in on it. And this is a characteristic that most vultures have, but this one's got this bare pinkish skin. And it's specifically there's no feathers on that part. Otherwise, when they're feeding on carcasses, it would become contaminated with blood, and it can potentially lead to infection. So the vultures which we find in Africa, we generally refer to as old world vultures, and the vultures which old world vultures generally uses sight to determine where their food is. And as mentioned in one of the previous episodes, it's believed that they can see a 6 centimeter diameter object at 1 kilometer away. Now we do get birds in the Americas, which is referred to as New World vultures, and they actually will mostly utilize the scent of smell to detect their food. So they can even find things in thick wooded areas which otherwise would not be able to be detected by means of sight. As I also understand, they use some of the New World vulture species to detect leaks on gas lines where these birds have been trained to detect these leaks. What I do find also quite interesting, however, with Old World and New World vultures, however, they look identical because they evolved according to the same food type, same lifestyle. They both soar and glide energy efficiently over large distances. They both live on carrion. They look identical, however, they're totally unrelated from one another. So we find with the New World vultures, they're more closely related to birds such as storks, where Old World vultures are related to birds of prey. We also mentioned in one of the previous editions that vultures actually have a pecking order when it comes to feeding. And we find that the smaller species can fly earlier, especially so in cool days. And they can often detect carcasses and indicate it to the larger ones. So if that carcass has been opened by predators, the small guys can start feeding. However, when the big guys arrive, then they will take over and the small ones have to wait again. What we also find is that the larger vultures will open the carcasses for it, and then if the smaller ones did find it, if it's not been opened yet by a large predator. Good morning, Zay. To answer your question in terms of intellectual abilities, I'm not quite sure how smart they are, but in terms of eyesight, they've got phenomenal eyesight, which really helps them to find their food. I would not be able to compare them against smart birds such as parrots and other birds that can learn very quickly. But yeah, they don't need to be really smart about what they do. They just have to have incredibly good eyesight to detect their food. So in the meanwhile, we're going to enjoy the landscape around the pan, and we're going to watch what's coming in and out. We're going to be sticking with Kalk Pan this morning for quite a while, as there is some technical challenges with the weather that's most likely affecting the reception and the signal at some of our other sites. I'm just going to reposition the vehicle, and we'll keep on watching and seeing what's coming in here. Can you shine for me on this tree at the water here? If you can get a nice close-up for me. Yeah, that's perfect. The tree that we've got on the screen at the moment, this is one of my favorite Kalahari trees. It's also probably one of the trees that acts as a lifeline to many species of animals in the Kalahari, which is dependent on leaf material. This is known as a shepherd's tree, and quite often we do find that shepherds will come and rest their animals underneath these trees, as they're the only tree that actually has shade during the winter months and leaves during the winter months as well. In terms of efficiency in providing shade, and big shepherd's trees can sometimes create temperatures which is up to 22 degrees cooler underneath a tree compared to the direct soil areas around that. One of the other alternative names for this tree is a witgat, which means pale-skinned tree because of the white coloration to the bark. So it's also quite often used as a tree where they will dig up the roots for making coffee. And the coffee that they make from that is to substitute the coffee. It's sometimes used to make a chicory-like substance. It's sometimes also blended with coffee to make it stretch even further. And locally that's referred to as witgat coffee because of the name of the tree. You can also use the roots of this tree to make a porridge. So quite often when we are looking for animals in the heat of the day or on our way back in the later parts of the morning, this is precisely the tree which most animals will be resting underneath. One. Yeah, this one has been a little bit stunted in its growth. However, there's a few of the big impressive specimens further to the back. I'm just going to ask Craig to scan on to some of them in the distance. And then from there, there's a herd of Springbok and wildebeest that's coming a little bit closer to us at the moment. We'll just keep our eyes on them and watch what they're up to. quite often when we do find certain plant-eating species of animals, we find them in mixed groups. And here we can see a mixed group of springbok and wildebeest. These are known as blue wildebeest, also known as a brindled gnu. And they're basically sticking together with one another purely because of safety of numbers. And we also find that they keep eyes open for one another, they warn one another, and they will also react to one another's alarm calls. The other reason why they stick together is wildebeest has the ability to open up the area for the other herbivores by eating coarser grasses, and then those species such as springbok will come and feed on the finer grasses, as they've got a much smaller muzzle compared to that of a wildebeest. If we also look at the springbok, most of them is already steering with their heads away from the sun and putting their white buttocks towards the sun to deflect the heat away from their body. So under normal conditions, these calcrete pans where we are looking for animals this morning is just pale white soil, and this is where the white underbelly also assists with reflecting heat away from the body. Good morning, Vic, and welcome to the show. Some of the differences between them is that springbok has got very short Lear-shaped horns, and we find, shaped horns, and then with Impala, they've got much bigger horns. If we also look at Impala, then first impression, the overall red coloration, but they also are pretty much going from darker to lighter colors at the bottom, and we only find horns in the male Impala. And then also, if you look at the springbok, you'll notice that they've got a very, quite a large contrast between upper and lower coloration patterns. And it's also disrupted by a black band on the side of, or dark band on the side of the animal's body. And then in this the eastern half of South Africa, we also don't find springbok. They're more adapted to dry western half of South Africa, so they prefer the more arid environments. And they're probably second best adapted animal to dry, arid environments after the gemsbok, which we often see around here as well. Just staring through the binoculars at the moment, quite a few of these springbok females have got big round bellies at the moment, so they're going to drop lambs probably very shortly. Hopefully in the next few days we might see a whole bunch of small little springboks running around. Just coming back to that earlier question about some of the differences between springbok and impala. Also what we'll find is with springbok that they have got a white crest of hair or dorsal hair that they can flare as part of a visual display, which we don't find with impala. We just want to quickly scan in onto that herd of springbok. There's a whole group of wattled starlings which is feeding in association with them. And these starlings are basically using the springbok at the moment to disturb insects, and as the insects are being disturbed, they will then catch them. Good morning, Rolling Rock. In terms of my favorite land animals, it is also quite a difficult question to answer. I do like smaller mammals, and if I have to think on the smaller scale of mammals, what I really, really like, things like bat-eared foxes, Cape foxes, animals like African wildcat is something that always makes me excited if I do find them. And little animals like genets and civets, those also make me very excited if I can find them. And then in terms of larger land mammals, I definitely love gemsbok. Cape eland is another all-round favorite for me. And when it comes to marine mammals, my favorite marine mammal will definitely be a killer whale. Coming back to some of my other favorite land mammals, I just love seeing springbok. For some reason, it's always such a wonderful group of animals to watch. And then lastly, if I think about something that really makes me excited, another nocturnal species or night active species, and those are lesser bush babies, which is a very small species of primate. It's actually the smallest primate in South Africa. You can still see wattled starlings coming in and out between the herd of springbok, still making use of them for a meal opportunity, as if they're disturbing the insects for them. Starlings aren't the only birds that will use the animals as beaters. We also see cattle egrets doing that quite often. And even species such as swallows will sometimes, and bee eaters will come from behind the animals as that they're disturbing insects and then catching them. So in the meanwhile, we're just going to pan through the landscape and just allow you to soak up the beauty of the landscape and listen to the sounds of nature. So if you notice around the waterhole, there's a large number of white pieces of rock. This is pieces of calcrete. Good morning, Dacian. If it's damp, yes, it definitely will be cooler. However, under normal conditions, when there's no vegetation on the swirl structure, this is actually a very harsh environment. as the white coloration deflects at heat, and it often will lead to that very few plants will grow on this. But being exceptionally high rainfall here, we can see that there's a number of small shrubs and grasses that's recolonized this area. I just also wanted to show you some of these rocks that we find in the area. This is calcrete, and these calcrete rocks, which we find here, often happens because of calcite precipitation, and this is quite typical of arid environments where the water levels evaporate, and eventually it creates a harder layer, creating these hard pans and allowing for water to remain in these areas once there's rainfall that has fallen. Once the pan is dried up, animals will normally move off. So quite often what we find is that we often have certain stone tools which we can find within these areas. And we also find that quite often that people would use these calcrete rocks, dig them up, break them up, and then they will put them on road surfaces to create a harder road surface, especially with loose sandy swells where vehicles can easily lose traction. There's two of these stone tools which we found, and you can see that they're still covered with a calcrete layer over here. This one over here is one of my favorites, actually. This is a stone tool that dates from the very early Stone Age. So the early Stone Age roughly starts some 2.5 million years ago, and it continues to roughly some 200,000 years ago. And with the early Stone Age, we find that the first group of tools belonging to a period which is known as the Older One Technology period, that they have very simple stone tools, which is normally just a pebble with a piece that has been chopped off, and then that was used for breaking open roots and tubers and smashing bones. So a very crude tool. And that technology ended up by some 1.4 million years, and as human beings started becoming more and more advanced in the forming of tools, we ended up in the second part of the early Stone Age, which is known as the Herculean period. So it's named after a cave where this type of tools was discovered in France. It's in the Saint-Hercule in the Somme region. But what we find is that the African technology in terms of the later part of early Stone Age is much older than that of the European style tool. And this is hand axe, and you can see where this piece of a rock, these pieces were actually struck off, and this was most likely used for butchering animals. But still fascinating to think that this tool can be anywhere between 1.5 million years and 200,000 years of age. So as the tools progressively became more sophisticated in the Middle Stone Age, later Stone Age, we found that the tools actually became smaller and smaller, and there was a tendency to stop using a core and striking off pieces of that, and rather to use the flakes that were struck off from the core, and that was then used for designing the tools. Other tool that we found over here, this looks like a scraper, which we have over here, and you can see it fits perfectly into the palm, and this was most likely used to scrape off meat from pieces of bone, or actually removing the remaining parts of meat from the inside of a hide of animals. Yes, we can think of it that the hides were often prized items, as this would become a clothing item for somebody to keep themselves warm. If we think of it, it would be used for making a bag, where you potentially keep your hunting items inside. And in the cases of the later Stone Age people, such as the Sun, they would use leather for thongs. They would also use it for making bags to put their implements and tools in, which they carried with them. And then lastly, we also find that the skin was often used for wrapping around quivers to keep the arrows inside. So yesterday we also were looking at a specific tree which was known as a Kalahari taibos, and they would most likely use a Kalahari taibos for tanning the leather that they will use to make it last. So just a few interesting little tools. So as but we find that we progressed with the later Stone Age, which started some 40 to 1,000 years ago and continued to as recently as 100 years or so ago. Some people consider the later Stone Age still to be continuing. We see that that period of time is typified by the Kukon people or Khoikhoi people, but who was known as a Korana in this area, as well as the Sun hunter-gatherers. Then we also find, in terms of our history, we don't have a Bronze Age period like Europe had, but we straight went into a period which was known as the Iron Age, which started some 2,000 years ago, when the first African people arrived, in terms of Bantu people arrived in Southern Africa. Seems as if we've got some more birds that just came in. We're just going to quickly pan on them and see what they are. Oh, next to the leopard-faced vulture, directly on the right-hand side of it, there's a marabou stork that's just came in. And if you look at the coloration of its legs, it's actually got white coloration to the legs. However, the legs are actually darkly colored. So one of their strategies is to actually defecate on their own legs, and the evaporation process, which then takes place, actually cools down their body temperature, bringing your body down by a few degrees Celsius. Fancy name for that process is called urohydrosis. Marabou storks, quite odd-looking birds, very long bill. They quite often will feed on insect outbreaks like the armored ground crickets, which we've been looking at. I've also seen them raiding nests of quillias and quite often scavenging from carcasses where they will grab pieces of meat as well. And they do that fairly quickly, and then they move away as they're trying to avoid any conflict with vultures. Good morning, Vidal. And to answer your question, we don't have any new world vultures in South Africa. We only have old world vultures. So I've never heard of a record of a new world vulture making its way into Africa yet. But nothing is impossible. Quite often we find that tropical cyclones and storms can blow birds many thousands of kilometers off course, and then they end up on the South African coastline as a rarity. One of those birds a few years ago was known as a black skimmer, which is a very close relative to the African skimmer. However, they do come from the Americas. Just like the vulture, you'll also notice that the marabou stork also has got a bald head. We're still just viewing the marabou stork in the distance and seeing what it's getting up to. It's quite odd to see marabou storks out here. It's not a bird that's quite commonly encountered in the arid western half of South Africa. We tend to find them more in moist environments where there's a higher food availability. But every now and then there's an odd bird coming into the area. Good morning, life lover, and welcome to the show. I definitely think they do. And we can often see it with certain species of insect, like the rain locust that we have over here, which is quite a commonly encountered large grey locust, will start calling before that it starts raining. We can also sometimes see that animals will respond to distant lightning and thunder, knowing that there will be rain in those areas, and they will sometimes move into those areas knowing that there's a possibility for fresh grass growth that will take place in that area. Just to come back with one of the questions which was asked earlier with regards to these Stone Age tools, which we have found. We don't have to hand them in to authorities, but what we do is we leave them where we found them. And these items are protected by the South African Heritage Resource Agency. And the reason why we don't remove them is if we take them with us, they cannot be used by archaeologists to determine precisely what has happened on. And sometimes something like this can be absolutely a vital clue in terms of how people lived, what they did, what they ate. So therefore, I will never remove archaeological artifact from an area. It is quite sad that people do so, and I would like to encourage people not to actually do that. Good morning, Ada, and it's absolutely a pleasure, and I'm really happy that you enjoy the content that we are providing. Maybe just pan again for us on those starlings over there. Craig is just going to pan in for us on that little tree next to the side of the pan. And there's a large number of starlings that are sitting up in that tree. And every now and then they'll fly down to come and have a little drink. And I'm going to try and show you the differences between the male and the female wattled starling. So quite often when they do land, you'll notice that the females tend to be quite dull in coloration, where the male has got a black and yellow wattle around the face. Here's a few down to come and have a drink now. 2, 3, 4 males that's just landed there. There's a few females coming in as well with a dull coloration. So those wattles will disappear by the end of the breeding season, and they're only used for the purpose of attracting a mate. Just a little bit of bling. There we go. There's a whole group of them busy having a little bit of a bathe now. So if you want to keep yourself cool under hot conditions, you come and bathe. You can also use water to loosen old preen gland oil on the feathers. But obviously, you also need water to assist you with digesting food, as well as making sure that you are remaining hydrated. Some of the bird species we find at this pan, however, they actually don't need to have any form of drinks. They just purely come in here, come and feed around the pan, live off insects, and they get enough moisture from the insects that they feed from. If we can maybe pan in on some of those doves in front of that shepherd's tree, that will be great. Just panning in on 2 ring-necked doves that's coming to drink. Some of you might know them as Cape turtle doves. And when we look at these ring-necked doves, you'll notice that they sip up water very quickly. And unlike the starlings that had to tilt their heads back, so they can very rapidly drink and then move off. And quite often, one of the birds that we find here mentioned in the previous show is lanner falcons, which like to come swooping in here, trying to catch doves, as well as sandgrass. Good morning, Lisa. To answer your question, we have only once seen a terrapin over here, and the species of terrapin that we will get in arid environments like this is a marsh terrapin. We don't have serrated hinge terrapins such as they have in the lowveld, and marsh terrapins seem to have ability of moving large distances over land and reoccupying little pools, and quite often it's to do with farms and farming techniques where dams and pans have been made specifically for animals to drink, and therefore these reptiles have been able to actually expand their range. There's a group of wildebeest that's coming a little bit closer. It seems that they would like to come in for a drink. We're just going to quickly pan on them. And they're still being followed by a group of wattled starlings, which is busy feeding on the insects that they've been disturbing. Here's one of the questions that I've been asked recently. What is the difference between a blue wildebeest and a black wildebeest? So one of them is, if we look at the blue wildebeest, they've got these brindled markings on the side. Hence the alternative name brindled gnu. If you also look at the blue wildebeest, you'll notice that it's got an all black tail. And if we look at the horns, they come to the side and then tilt inward. However, with the black wildebeest, which is a grassland endemic species, which we find in the Highveld region of South Africa, they're also known as a white-tailed gnu, so they also have a white tail tip by which you can separate them, and their horns tend to point forward and then upward. They also tend to be smaller, and in general they're also more aggressive in their behavior compared to blue wildebeest. In the past, these two species were quite often encountered on the same reserves. However, in the last few decades, it's actually been encouraged not to have them on the same reserve. And as far as I remember, there's also penalties for having them on the same reserve. I'm not quite sure what has actually disturbed them now, although they are quite closely related species, and therefore they have a risk of interbreeding, and that's the reason why you should not have both species. It seems like we've got a dominant bull that's chasing an individual that's come into the area where they're not very happy with him being here. So quite often dominant bulls will set up territories around areas where there's high quality resources, good grazing, good water resources, and any other male that comes in then will be chased away by that territorial male. Here he comes back. Looks very happy with himself. He's just chased off a number of people that shouldn't be in his area. I think there's another one moving in, and there's another bull running closer. He might try and chase this one as well. Good morning, Andrew. To answer your question, the social structure differs. We've got solitary dominant bulls, which occupies a territory, and we sometimes have small groups of males, which is known as a bachelor herd, and then we've got females that forms the breeding herd with their associated young, sometimes up to a year-old individuals that will still stick with them. Sometimes you find young males still from a year or a little bit older that might associate with them. Those will also eventually go into one of the bachelor or all-male groups. Our one wildebeest that has just chased off all the others. He's now decided to come for a drink. Beautiful with a reflection in the water. So earlier we mentioned that pre-orbital gland that they use for marking their territories. Just going to scan in underneath the eye, and you'll be able to see that gland that they use for rubbing on branches. I quite often like to watch these solitary males when they're on their territories, and every now and then they've got a silly moment where they will start doing all kinds of strange behaviors. They might spin like a top, they might run up and down, they might cart up and down, and this has actually given them a nickname of Clown of the Bushveld, which is one of the names that many a guide will refer to as a blue wildebeest because of their silly behavior. One of the questions I was asked earlier in the show, which I haven't had the opportunity to answer yet, is why does wildebeest not migrate in South Africa compared to those that we find in East Africa? They historically used to migrate, but due to man-made water holes which provides them with permanent water, they no longer need to move off into areas, but also because of man-made structures, fences, all of these have led to that wildebeest no longer migrate in South Africa. And depending on the part of the country in South Africa, it would depend how their migrations would be. In general, we find that most animals do a north-south migration. However, if we do go to the Lowveld region of South Africa, they actually would historically have done a east-west migration for going to greener feeding areas. One of the other things that I find particularly interesting about the blue wildebeest when you watch them in East Africa, when they migrate across the Mara River, they will also move in accordance to rainfall, which will trigger their movements. And what we see is that those territorial males, unlike the one that we have here, that never leaves his territory, will actually have a mobile territory, which will be adjusted on a daily basis as they migrate. I was also asked recently what is one of the differences between appearance between the blue wildebeest that we have in South Africa and those of East Africa, and I was asked if it was the same species. They are the same species, however they're different subspecies. So a subspecies is just a group within a species that's become geographically isolated, and they've started to develop slightly little differences between one another. So the wildebeest, which we find in East Africa, is sometimes referred to as a white bearded gnu, as that they've got white hairs around the muzzle and beard, compared to the ones we find over here, which has got an all dark beard. Good morning, Kate. Yes, there's, in general, there is a mating season for them. They tend to mate, and with their mating coinciding that they will eventually have their young when it's a peak of the rain season. And in the eastern half of South Africa, they normally get born here by December, January. But you'll see that they will start dropping calves. So most species of animals have distinct breeding seasons, and they will deliberately time the gestation period to such a manner that they can drop their young then when there's plentiful food. Then there's other species such as lion and leopard, which has got polyestrous cycles, so they can literally fall pregnant and go in at any time of the year. We also find it with Springbok, where they can give birth at any time of the year. They also try and coincide it with high rainfall periods. However, with an arid environment like this, you can't predict that you're going to have sufficient food at a specific point of time in the year. We also see with the wildebeest, when they are females in estrus, that those bulls will try and herd those females into their territory and prevent that they leave, and thus preventing that other males can potentially mate with them. With wildebeest, we also find that they've got quite a long gestation period. If we think of it, they've got a roughly 9-month gestation period. And if you compare that to smaller antelope species, such as bushbuck, which has got a fairly short gestation period compared to them, only 6 months, we find that they have specifically evolved longer gestation periods so that they can give birth to a calf which can stand within a few minutes and follow the parents within minutes, so that they can keep up during those migrations with the parents. Unlike bushbuck, which has a calf that will be lying out for quite a long time. If I remember correctly, laying out period for a bushbuck calf, sometimes up to 3.5 months. We don't have bushbuck in this area, but I just like to always use it as a comparison because of it having an incredibly long lying out period where it will be remaining hidden from predators, and where the parent will go back to it on a daily basis to feed it, clean it, and make sure that it's well. And then once it's strong enough, big enough, then it can start following mom. Good morning, Kyle. Just to answer your question on that, we do have some, but not many. It's something that's very well managed on Tswalu. However, in most conservation areas in South Africa, we find that there's programs such as Working for Water, where they will come into the area, remove alien invasive plant species to try and re-establish natural flow of water. Unfortunately, even in conservation areas, people would bring in things like plants which they would think would not be invasive at all, purely for ornamental purposes. Before long, you can see monkeys, baboons, and birds spreading out the seeds or fruits, and then you start noticing that you have a problem. I can remember a few years ago there was a program even where they were removing plants within certain river systems in the Lowveld region of South Africa. Because alien invasive plants even had an effect on the crocodile populations and having a skewed sex ratio within those environments. So they create more shade on these traditional nesting sites of where crocodiles would normally go and bury their eggs. And as that the eggs of crocodiles are temperature dependent, we find that the colder temperatures will lead to the development of females, while warmer temperatures would generally lead to males. And eventually there was a higher amount of females that were hatching at that point. We often underestimate how alien invasive plant species can actually affect our environment. There's a number of different ways that we can deal with alien invasives. One of the ways is you can either physically remove them, or you send in a group of laborers. You can also use certain plant toxins to kill them off, or sometimes they'll use mechanical means to actually just delve through that area to remove them. So quite often we also find plants which we refer to as natural encroachers, which is a plant species which is indigenous to South Africa, which can become invasive in some areas, especially if those areas have been disturbed. And I can remember a few years ago in one of the Northwest parks, there was an interesting additional method that they used to actually deal with these naturally encroaching plant species. And they actually utilized elephants to deal with their problem. And how they tricked the elephants into dealing with a challenge was to spray these plants with molasses. So they brought down the costs in terms of physical labor. They also reduced the use of herbicides, which is plant toxins, which is definitely a plus point, as you don't really want to use toxins because you don't always understand the level of which they can affect the environment. And literally these elephants just pulled up all these naturally invasive occurring plant species. Good morning, Teresa. It's basically parts of this pan which must most likely historically been delved up to get the rock, so they could take it to the different roads to use it to cover the road. But under normal conditions, you don't see a lot of rocks throughout the Kalahari. So it's possible even that this pan might have been much larger, but has lost its ability to keep water because of past practices. So we also must remember that before Tswalu became a reserve, it was also cattle lands, and a lot of farming activities that took place over here, and eventually the land was brought back for conservation purposes through a number of different people, and eventually it became under the ownership of the current owners, who has put an incredible emphasis in establishing the areas surrounding Tswalu into conservation areas, and quite often regularly buying up more pieces of land so that we can conserve this beautiful environment and unique environment of the Kalahari. So in the meanwhile, we're just still watching, seeing what's coming in and out from this pan. Our wildebeest has now sort of disappeared in the distance, and we're just going to see what we can find in terms of birds coming in and out to come and have a drink. So for a short while, we're just going to allow for a little bit of silence and allow you to soak up the beautiful sounds of birds chattering away. In the meanwhile, we're going to hand you over to Andrew, who's currently viewing a group of Egyptian geese.
Thanks so much, JP. So here we got Egyptian geese. Looks like two of them, another one just disappear away from the one that you can see right now. So Egyptian geese, they're one of the birds that sometimes they find or been seen near the water a lot of the time, but at time they move out of the water, and this is actually far from the water right now where we see them. And since they're actually a vegetarian bird, so they would feed on, when they're around the water, they eat anything softer growth of plants, reeds, shoots of these new leaves. And when they're out here, they're probably a special diet that they're actually about to feed, and then maybe later they'll return to one of these water holes. But you do find sometimes, because they also pair for life, every time they arrive in so many of these water holes, it's already occupied. If it's actually a small pen, which means they tend to not to like to be mixed up, so you will see the dominant or those pair that are already occupied, that pens won't actually allow any of the other Egyptian geese to arrive, most especially males. Those are the problem, because there's a challenge there where there's a fight for probably winning the female. just busy checking around. When I'm out in this wood, they're probably kind of like slightly vulnerable to big bird of prey, which most martial eagle will prey on them. And those martial eagles are actually big bird. I only saw it once when they're preying on such a geese species, when they just land on it and sit on it, kill it right on the ground. Where many of the other birds of prey, they actually took it up. Josh Gull. So you want to know what they're related to? So they're related to most dark, but they are kind of like also water independently when they have to. Where dark, they always permanently around the water hole. We're same as these, but the only reason you find them in the lane, they don't always have to be in the water hole. Even though they feed on sorts of amount of food also dark, they do the same. And now actually we don't have a lot of doubt of bird out here, but they're probably around. We haven't seen them yet. So I'm going to carry on search around here. I'm going to be sending you over to Lauren with her water buck.
The Djuma team is back. We had a little bit of a technical glitch, but we're back. We're just admiring this water buck. I think it's the dominant male that you normally find around Gowrie Dam. He's just crossing his way through quarantine. Very relaxed compared to other antelope. Mostly, I'm going to try and reverse, mostly due to his size. So just an update, we had Tandy and Cub this morning on Torchwood, but unfortunately the internet would not allow for any success. So I'm going to quickly spend a little bit of time with this water buck, but then head straight back down south to try and relocate Tandy and Cub. I believe they've crossed on to Chitwa, but I'll need to do some investigating. And wouldn't that be perfect? A great way to start the new year with Tandy and her son. Mr. Waterbuck, you're not making life very easy for me. One more time to reverse, Gav. There you go. He's starting to cross quarantine. Tom, you're asking about the bum circle, and that's exactly what it is. Now, most of the species out here have follow me signs of some sort, and it's normally black or white on the ears or maybe the tail or the rump, and it assists in the offspring following the mother, but it also assists when you live in a herd. Especially for impala, they have sort of an M-shaped black and white marking on their bottom, and it helps when the impala are all fleeing from the predators. They're able to keep track of where each other are by following those signs. So that's exactly what that white circle acts as. But it's just wonderful. There's another species up in the Masai Mara, subspecies, the Dafasa waterbuck, and it does not have that bum circle, and it's rather disappointing. Okay, I think we need to head south if we want to have any luck at trying to locate Miss Tandy and Cub. Bless me, everyone. Sorry. That cannot have been pleasant. I apologise. And try to get on the radio and find out exactly where they went. So wish me luck. I think there's lions on Djuma as well, so hopefully Andrew will head over to them and find out exactly who. I can smell fresh elephant. Okay, I'm going to put my foot down a little bit and hopefully we'll have some spots for you very soon.
How insane is that animal?
This is out of this world. Fantastic. Good, Mama.
Wow, what a way to start off.
It's just such an incredible privilege to be out here. It just keeps on delivering.
There you go, there you go. Heart is pumping right now.
3, 2, 1. You are live, you are live.
Look at this, everybody. We've got a live kill.
The cock's holding the tail. It's holding tight. Lucky wildebeest. There's nowhere to go. This is a disaster in the making.
Something that I have never seen before in my entire life that you are now watching live.
My heart is in my mouth, everybody.
Look at this. It's gonna make it. It's going, it's going.
This is just too magical. Hi, little guys. That's great, isn't it? Look at that. Scuba Steve has got a friend.
You've got a friend in me. It couldn't be a better morning. This is just too special.
Oh my goodness, we've got a turtle.
How epic is the fact that we're coming to you live from the Chobe River?
It's the most incredible feeling to be here. This is live, and we're in Rwanda. This is a very, very different adventure, charged with emotion.
I did not think I would ever face my fears like this.
Thanks, JP. So we're still sitting here with these Egyptian geese. You see how they probably busy with these grass seeds they're actually busy feeding on right now. And this is why maybe they're up here, because, you know, special grasses that don't grow around the water hole. And some special grasses that they grow but far from the water hole. This is maybe why they decide to come to this far off the water. So they balance both, where when they're around the water there's also a special diet, which is reeds, shoots, and when they're out here also this type of flower, a bit of plants, they would actually feed on those, mixed with some of a licorice, new shoots, and of course finger grasses, which is plenty of those grasses in this area. And always male and female Egyptian geese, but you do come across sometimes many of them in the same area where there have been those kind of like nomadic birds where they find themselves in such a group, or some of them haven't yet dominate. And it can be noisy when Migrant, you're right. It's actually indeed a very beautiful bird. Especially geese is off the land, just like this. Where we normally find them near the water. So we're looking at them from far distance because they're very flighty. They don't trust much, not like other birds do. So when the male and the females are together, they mainly make sound, especially when there's a presence of other species, probably the same species, or maybe there is a warning that they have to warn each other when there's an eagle above the air, or maybe leopard, because leopard can hunt birds like this, and of course it's a decent size for just a little snack and get energy going. Do a normal search hunt as a leopard. You remember they're actually one of the birds, you would tame them and you find a very young chicks and you raise them. You gotta have a little bit of pans around your garden, because they're more likely after feed or during a hot got into water you're more likely to see them throughout the country most of the time. Egyptian geese. And the male and the female, they look pretty much the same, but then just gonna no, they don't actually crossbreed though, and I never heard of it, so I don't think they do. There's always, every time, they don't like mixing with other dark, and they always Egyptian geese to Egyptian geese. Even though they found the male sometimes lost a fight, and another same species will take over the female. Sometimes it's going to be very hard. It's like a human being. You hear what's happening when a female, she's not accepting for that male. She will also go out, look for the male that she had always, if she's not happy with it. It's kind of similar with human. You can't force too much power in somebody who is not interested in you. Even though you have power, but then it's kind of abused, so it's similar to a bird like this. And they're busy actually. They're actually trying to get as much as they can, the seed grasses. And they'll go down, drink water. This is their special diet, just the plants and this grass. New shoots of flowers most. And it's so peaceful out here. I'm just hoping if maybe the leopard will surprise us, or lions maybe walk across in front of us. And it's so peaceful morning, which I'm hoping to look for those cats and see if there's any around here. So the male, they make sound, but different to what female do. So female more noisy, like grunting sound and things like that, or honking sound. Where female, it's a hiss, or the male, it's a hissing sound. It looks like an air pump in and out from way distance when you have that, when you hear it. But maybe the reason that the female should have such a sound is because of contacting with their chicks if they ever get lost, which is uncommon. They're all members involved in taking care of these chicks, making sure they all survive. And they actually hatch anything from about 8, maybe 9, maybe 7 chicks. It's been seen moving around a lot of time maybe die of an NNHA which would be maybe bird of prey when they're not actually inexperienced enough to go to hide if there's an attack. And then for the nest, they prefer the nest for somebody made. Dominic, so you want to know how long they're going to spend here. So it depends. What I sometimes you found out is that the nearest waterhole, maybe it's occupied and it's maybe small, or it's got a lot of these, pair of these birds in there. So every time they arrive, then they get pushed out and they have to return back to the land until they figure out where they're going to find their permanent waterhole. So it could that maybe they don't mind. They'll spend maybe the whole day here. And then if they go to water, maybe a very small waterhole just for a drink and stay in one of the shade over here. So maybe they may return back to the water if they just make their own decision to come to this far. Maybe just before very hot, they will actually move into the waterhole for their cool off, and they do their best, searching around, calling out, territorial defensive, to find their own small puddle of water there. So I'm gonna move forward. So peaceful bird, finally, they were moving away, but they're slowly getting close to us, which you can see, the full body of this bird. Yeah, the male's hissing now, busy hissing sound. Just a little bit. When I look up in the sky, there's nothing. Julia, indeed, very much. So the only time where they are not uncomfortable with any of the present, and this is where you see or can able to tell from the from far distances where reaction will be different, and they're just gonna, fly, circle around, land, again take off, fly, circle around, and land. So this is when they're not actually okay with any of our presence. Maybe there's any disturbance that took place in the area. But there seems to be very nice and quiet now. So wherever these comb dark and those whistling dark, there seems to be still dominating the other small species of dog out here. And there's also another biggest species of geese where the spare wings geese, where those are slightly rare out here, but they do come in. But you more find them in a bigger lake this time of year. And that one, they're more likely to be sometimes one at a time. So I'm gonna keep on checking here while I'm sending you over to Lauren with her leopard.
We made it. Now, I can't quite tell who we're looking at here. It's a lot of spots. I know that Tandy and her son are both in the area. But in the long grass, I'm not actually sure which individual we're looking at right now. I think it could be her cub, but we've got them. On Chitwa Chitwa. They crossed all the way from Torchwood and came down south, and luckily were able to traverse Chitwa. So Tandy and son are New Year leopards. It's been a while since I've seen them. They spend a lot of time on Torchwood. Most of their time on Torchwood. That's Tandy. Lee, you're saying awesome, some spots. Yes, absolutely. There's Tandy cat here. You can see from those tattered ears. Her son has perfect ears. Normally you can tell a much older leopard by their sort of condition, their physical condition, and the ears are one thing, a good thing to look at. Can you see the son, Davy? Is he also there?
Can't really tell.
Yeah, it's very difficult to tell. Do you know, I'm thinking, should we reposition here? Okay, we can try. Let's just try and gently reposition. I'm seeing spots everywhere. This might not work, but let's try. Yes, they're both there. Okay. Can you get them, Dobby? Yes, there is. There are two leopards there, not just Tandy. Dobby actually hasn't seen Tandy's son in a very long time, and oh my, he's grown. Hello guys, Happy New Year! Tandy's done so well with this boy. He was born around March, and he'll stay with her for up to 2 years, give or take. Males stick with their mothers just a little bit longer than females do. So he's got another little while to stick around before thinking about dispersing. But when he comes to 2, most likely he'll disperse. Set up his own territory and meet a whole new gene pool of ladies. If you think about it, Tlalamba, he's related to Tlalamba. That would be his half-sister that we know of, because we don't actually know who his father is, but they're definitely related. Related to Kuchava. If Mulwati's the individual that's fathered all the cubs around right now, then he could even be related to Sabui's daughter. But we don't know that, that's speculating. But my point is, it's important for him to disperse. Seek a new territory, find a vacuum, find an area where he can push in and establish himself. Establish social dominance. Just like a limpet on a rock. It's not the best views, but they're nicely in the shade, and maybe in a moment we can reposition, but they're definitely both here, having some mother-son time and grooming one another. How perfect. Are you happy, Davy? Davy had the best time at Tswalu, but he did say he missed spots. How could you not? Okay, I've definitely found my sighting for the day, so I'm going to sit here and enjoy.
Thanks, Lauren. So we also have a harem of impalas again in this position. So, it was actually a leopard track around here that headed west. So we're going to check now the western boundary again. So it could be that Shidula, I believe, is so, because this is where she normally come in and out of this area. And I'm not sure, because then also Tingana, this is the last track, his last tracks was actually moving west. So I'm kind of like checking with this impala, because they at the same time might be hunting impala. But they don't show any stress behavior or anything like that. And they're all just chilled and feeding around. And where they are, they're actually clever animals. They're in this open patch. So any movement, they can pick it up and they will be spotted. Already spotted whatever it is trying to get into them. So I'm checking the few roads here. Hopefully I get more of this Leopard track.
Lots of really precious mother and son time here. Really, a lot of grooming now. They're found together quite a lot. It's almost as if he's reached a stage where they're travelling a lot more together, just like Kotrava and her son. There was a stage where we were finding Tandy a lot on our own, but they're travelling together now. Oh. I don't know what she's snarling at. Hello. It's not us. I think it's a bug or an insect or something's annoyed her. And that was the Tandy smile, everyone. If you've never seen that before, well, Tandy loves to smile. Do you know what, Davi? Let's get round before we lose complete visual here in the long grass. What a winner! I'm so happy. What a great start to a new year. I'm just going to drive slowly. I've spent a fair bit of time with this cub, and when he's with mom, he's relaxed, but he does get a little bit overwhelmed sometimes when there's a lot of vehicles. Robert, at this stage is tricky, possibly. Very, very possibly. He'll be hunting now, albeit small things. He won't necessarily be taking down great big antelope. But Jessie could... Hosanna and Shongile lost their mother quite young as well. And obviously, Hosanna survived. So at this stage, at 9 months old, coming up for 10, possibly, he could survive. But it would take a lot. Tandy leaves him. He's used to long bouts on his own. He's used to feast. He's used to famine. And he will be hunting. Absolutely. Now, Tandy, it would be so lovely if you went up this tree. I think that's a no. We're not going to go up the tree. I'm just going to let other vehicles in the area go up ahead, and then we'll follow. Matt, sorry, just let me try and look at them here. There's a big herd of waterbuck getting very I'm Okay, I can't actually see them, but Matt, for females, it's a sort of very different, their priorities for setting up a territory are different. So their mother actually hands them a section of her territory and, excuse me, it's all about finding the right area, fitting into all the competitors that has resources. Females' main goal is to reproduce. Get ready, get strong for reproduction. Choose an area where there's a plentiful food supply and guaranteed water. Now for males, they disperse, so they have to be old enough and strong enough to disperse, and their sole goal for setting up a territory is females. So it's also reproduction, but it's a different aspect. Males have to go, they've got to find an area, they may have to battle, they may
Sorry about that, Lauren. So we still on search around here since we left that high rim of impalas. Still taking it easy feeding, and that doesn't show us like they have any problem. So we're still, I'm checking here if there's the tracks leading different direction, because the last tracks were actually cutting straight west. You never know, leopards, they're actually very sneaky. You find maybe she's around, maybe she's taking her own time, looking at a target there, and that's why we waited for enough time. But what we've seen there looks like a both sides of the road. There's impalas. I'm gonna do a big loop, come back from the other side there. It just looks like a one set of tracks, so it's only the female, not more than one. I was amazed the other day when we found she's doing that hit, and then she was still showing very much interested on moving in that heat. So when we look at this weather this morning, it's not yet there where it's still temperature allows them to get to exercise their strategies, energies, move around about, stay behind the prey species. They attack their own time. Whenever they spot a target, if it's not possible, they have to wait for a long time. And again, so you want to know how do I tell the difference from male to female? So the female tracks a lot smaller compared to a male. Even if it's a young male, once he's anything from 9 to 10 months old, so the size of the paw is already double the full-grown female tracks. So then that's why it's easy to see if it's a male or a female. But same with the lions, where they're big cats. When you track the lioness, you will know it's a lioness only. If it's a mix of a male and a female, you would already know that, because the tracks all look different in size. So it's easy that way though. But then you need to know your track skills and things like that, because you don't want to follow cheetah, then it's a leopard, or you follow leopard, then you find cheetah, where there also tracks there's a difference. Where cheetah tracks shows a lot of a bit of a claw on front, of their toe. So every time they move, just like a hyena, so these claw nails also marking in front of their toe, so you know it's not a true cat. Where a true cat, their claws are attractive, which is their inside while the animals move. Only need them for emergency, grab whatever they chase. Of course, a very sharpened claw for a true cat. So it looks like impalas all over. So it happens when leopards sometimes they're on hunt and they don't spend a lot of time on roads most. Once you find the tracks on the road and the tracks off the road, and
Good morning and welcome back to Tswalu. We're just making our way to another waterhole, see if we can find anything. But in the meanwhile, we've got a beautiful silhouette of a big sable bull that's walking on one of a dune crest. I was asked yesterday what is the difference between this and a roan, and one of the questions, and now we can clearly see the jet black coloration as well as a white underbelly, hence the Afrikaans name meaning a swart witpens, meaning a black-white belly. And we can also notice that incredibly long curved back set of horns which they have. Sable don't normally occur naturally in this environment. However, we've seen in a number of areas they were brought in to try and protect their population and increase their numbers over the last few years. Historically, this was a species which was quite common in the southern parts of Kruger National Park, especially around the areas of Pretorius-Kop and modern-day Sabi Sands. I can remember an interesting story that I read about this antelope, that it was so common at one stage that it was often the choice over other antelope species to hunt and to give to his staff as rations in the earlier days. Sadly, today these are only restricted to a number of conservation areas, and a handful of them Good morning, Lerato, and welcome to the show. You're definitely right. They've got an impressive set of horns, and you can think of how effective these can be used as weapons against a potential predator, and just as effective in protecting themselves against other bulls. We also see in the last decade or so there was a large number of these animals which were bred specifically for their horns, as there was an increase in market price for buying sable bulls for aesthetical purposes for reserves, simply to say that my sable bull is bigger than yours and mine has got a bigger set of horns than yours. And if I remember correctly, at one stage there was a bull that went roughly for the price of 36 million rand. However, there's rumors that there are some of them that were sold for even more. But for some reason, this is no longer a sought after price to have on your property, and we see that the market price for this animal has sort of dropped. However, I love them wherever they are. They're one of the most beautiful of the antelope species, and I really hope that their numbers will start increasing naturally again. But we can relocate and translocate them to areas relocate them to areas where they once used to live. In the meanwhile, we're going to continue, see what's happening in the Griffin Pan, and we're going to hand you over to Andrew, who's busy viewing a group of Dwarf Mongoose.
Thanks, JP. Here what do we come across now? It's actually little creatures. Very interesting about them. The Dwarf Mongoose. I think this is all about now getting out of the mound. Started to hunt. And they feed on insect. All of those lizards. And they're capable of killing snake as well. So they turn to be the smallest carnivore. Hear the sound they're making. This is how they communicate amongst the group. And they're very social. When they're out about feeding, moving in and out of the area, so they set up their territory where they move as a group of a number of anything from 15, probably 17 in a group, or could be more than that, depending. But also, there's a system here where there's a pair breed where male and female, so alpha male and alpha female. Just kind of like watching out before they move far. So they, during the forage, since they move in group, a lot of the group, they will be in there hiding or foraging through grasses. And maybe one would climb the mound, which is slightly height enough to look out. Because then they have still a lot of problem with the bird of prey, hawks, eagles will prey on them. This is when they're out of this mound. And they're so quick when they move out of that burrow there, they shoot. Matt, so you're saying if they're the same family as a meerkat? Oh, I'm not sure, but they are type of, it's called a Mangousidae, which is a kind of like rodent, even closer there. Most, and they are Viveridae. So it could be that they're closer related, though. See the beautiful small ears. Normally, when the rest of the group, this adult, a pair breed, they have to go out to feed. When they have a young one, there's a system where there's a, helpers here, they stay with their young one. So I'm going to try stay put, and I'm going to be sending you over to Lauren with the leopard.
We just had the most perfect visual. She's just jumped down, everyone. This is not Tandy. This is not her son. This is Sabui. Yes, Tandy went into a drainage and unfortunately we couldn't get... I don't know what happened there. We had Sabui perfectly up in the tree there for you, but sadly she's now on the move, which is going to make it rather tricky for us. Tandy and Cub went into the drainage, and Sabui's here now. She was sitting perfectly perched in this marula. We may as well follow Darby. I don't see any signs of our offspring, our son and daughter, but both Tandy's son and Sabui are all on Chitwa. She's walking there. Let's try and get ahead of her. There's 2 other vehicles here, which means they can also keep tabs on her. I think she's going to pop out here on the road. 3 leopards. I think she is going to pop out here. Let me just make space for other vehicles. You got her. Just want to try for other vehicles. You got her. Just want to try and pull to the side. Ah, here she is. Now I can't pull to the side. She's right in front of the road. Hello, beautiful. She's remarkably close to Tandy, walking in a different direction, but they're really not far away from one another. 500 meters, what would you say, Dove? Okay, we need to move again before we truly lose sight of her. Okay, there we go. Walking right behind the vehicle, but still, we've got a visual. She's heading towards the Gowrie Main in that sort of direction. She's heading north. But it's remarkable how sort of Tandy and Sabui regularly push their boundaries touch. I think Trishala once had a sighting of them both together. I once had a sighting that wasn't live of them being very aggressive to one another. Tandy and Sabui are both dominant females. They've both got offspring. And their territorial boundaries definitely do meet with one another. They're constantly pushing. Sabui's constantly pushing and Tandy's constantly pushing back. But as I mentioned, there definitely has, in my opinion, been a shift in Tandy's sort of patterns, her territory. I feel she's just gone a little bit more east towards Kuchava, which could make space for Sabui around our sort of southern boundary, Twin Dams, Treehouse Dam. But it's a constant push and pull. Territories are dynamic. If a leopard was weak and maybe unwell for about a month, you'll find that the whole entire area shifts. I'm about to drive Darby into a tree. Apologies. Because they're constantly trying to expand. Okay, she's over here. The leopards are not making it easy today, shall we say? Oh, Mount Lizzie, big log. Okay, Gwen, I think we need a little bit of a moment here to try and relocate her. It's a tricky area. We're not going to get visual of her right now. There's lots of potholes. There's lots of burrows. I almost went down a hole right there. But we're all good. We're all good. Okay, bear with me, everyone. I am going to relocate her. It's just going to be a little bit of a challenge.
dead. Oh, that was amazing. I can't. How do I it's like that is hands down the coolest.
Expect the unexpected here on WildEarth daily. For the month of January 2021, we are offering a chance to win a unique WildEarth expedition to the magnificent Tswalu Kalahari. From the ancient Kortai's Koranenberg Mountains to the southern Kalahari's red sand dunes, Tswalu offers what travelers crave most: space and time. The winner will explore this landscape in a vehicle, on foot, or on horseback, with a chance to go behind the scenes with WildEarth and of course meet the meerkats. The prize includes a 3-night stay for you and a friend at the luxury Motse Lodge, including flights from either Johannesburg or Cape Town. Open to all WildEarth explorers who have signed up before the end of January 2021. Terms and conditions apply.
Why is Demora special? It's one of the only few places that you can find the annual wildebeest migration. I will still go for the lion. The main reason is a sign of royalty, leadership in my tribe, and apart from that, over here, it is feared by all but loved by everyone.
Catch up with the guides daily here on WildEarth.
She's up on top of a termite mound, which is absolutely perfect for me. We thought we would have an easy drive this morning. We should be so lucky. So Sabui was born in December 2013, so this is her birthday month. No, sorry. Last month was her birthday month. She turned 7. We're in January now, I believe, or so they say. And her litter of 2 were born in August 2019. So they're now 1 year and 4 months or so, and it's a male and female, Shasha and Langa. And the father is not confirmed, but is thought to be Mawati, Quarantine, or possibly Tingana. I would guess Mawati, but it's just a guess. But she did have a litter in December 2017. And one cub, was killed by another male leopard. You managed there? Do you want me to go forward? Okay. And one cub remains, and that's the female Kopona. Sorry, I'm just navigating through some traffic. Sir 50, not at all. So, as I mentioned earlier, territory has a different purpose for the sexes. So, you have natural selection, but then further deeper into that is sexual selection, and that's where, along the lines of evolution, there's specialized adaptations for both the sexes because they have different needs. Males need to sire as many offspring as they can to continue their bloodline. Females have got to raise their offspring. I've got the most perfect view here, David. Do you want me just to go forward a tad? Okay, hold on. So a male sets up a very large territory to encompass as many females as he can. Now, they say normally for a male leopard, the minimum is 3 females within his territory. Females' territories are much smaller, generally speaking, and it will reside within a dominant male's territory, and he will be the residing dominant male. But they can travel... Oh, that looks good. A little itchy, scratchy there. They can travel out with their own territories to mate. It benefits if
it's online. I think they just chat. I just want to hear if I'm not live.
Good morning and welcome back to Tswalu. We just got out of a vehicle in the dunes fields to quickly have a look at some tracks and see what we can find. But in the meanwhile, we're going to just pan for you onto these long dune fields and tell you a little bit more about them. So for those of you that have tuned in with us for the first time, the red Kalahari swells that you can see is a swells that's derived from an ancient landscape where the swells were wind deposited into this area. So we find that the sands, or red Kalahari Sands, which you see here, extends all the way from southern Africa and the northern Cape region into Namibia, Botswana, and eventually into Angola and Zambia. The red dunes that you see in front of you, they extend approximately 800 to 1,000 kilometers in length, and they extend from east to west, roughly from 150 to 200 kilometers. The red coloration is due to iron oxide that oxidized, and we also will quite often see a number of animal species that are only found in this specific soil types. One of them is one that we would like to tell you a little bit later on if we find one of their little mounds of soil that they have excavated, and this is a Demora Mole Rat. While we're continuing looking at a few tracks over here, we're going to hand you over to Nikki, who is currently looking at a number of ducks.
I really hope JB is able to get some tracks. So we're back here at andBeyond Ngala. And the signal has been off and on this morning. You can imagine being in the African bush, not always the strongest of signals. But have a look here. Some very interesting ducks that we can see. So you'll notice the one especially that's moving from or towards the left of the screen. Basically all of them, you can see it on their bill. You'll see there's this growth, and it's known as a Knobble Duck or comb-bill duck. And this is normally like it swells up like that, especially during the breeding season. And then out of the breeding season, it goes down quite a bit. So it's not as prominent as we can see now. So most of those are males. The females are the ones that don't really have those combs on top of their bills. But this is such a beautiful waterhole. We have the Knobble ducks, just right of them are some Egyptian geese, and then some hippos that's towards the middle of the waterhole as well. You might just see them coming up in there. It's hard to see with the light what it might be, but it looks like it could be Egyptian goslings. Now, Egyptian geese, it's one of the probably the most widespread waterbird here in southern Africa. But where the name comes from is the Egyptians were actually the first people to domesticate them, hence the name the Egyptian goose or geese. Just trying to see where that hippo is at the moment. Yeah, they're just moving off to the right now. It's amazing to know that there used to be quite a few hippos in this waterhole, and after the rain, most of the hippos have moved on to some more, to other waterholes. There's a lot more water around. In the wintertime, when it concentrates and there's less and less water, they'll move to these more prominent water holes like this one here. I think slightly left, or yeah, right there. Matt, you had a very interesting question. I just didn't copy, or I didn't hear all of it. It's in regards to something with animals in the water, their behavior, or... think it all depends on different animals, but I haven't really. I mean, maybe it has been recorded before, but I think from my personal experience, I don't think I've ever seen an animal looking at its reflection in the water and getting a fright or intimidated by it. I just don't think I've ever seen that. I do know that some animals, though, are very wary of when they do go to the water. Something like a wild dog, especially if there's crocodiles, or if they know there might be crocodiles in the area. Like, wild dogs are very, very cautious around the waterholes, and sometimes they'll get, like, they can really get a fright quickly. But other than that, I just haven't really seen it. And I would like to know, I mean, if any of our viewers, please drop a comment, send us through some experiences if you've heard about animals, especially with water, and going for a drink if they get a fright by looking at their reflection, or if they can see that. I know there's experiments done with mirrors where animals could react to a mirror, but I don't know about reflection in the water. Well, with these ducks, probably something like a crocodile can go for them. Often jackal, especially if they are towards the edges, maybe if there's a jackal that moves around and they're not too aware. Something like an eagle can go for them. Pretty much quite a few. I've even seen herons. So when these have young, and the young are really, really small, something like a heron can even go for them. Catfish. So, I mean, they have quite a few predators, depending on, of course, where they are. If they're in the water like this, I think there's only a few. Maybe a crocodile at the most for some of these bigger ones. But I do know also, like, what's quite interesting is sometimes with jackal, that has been recorded where vultures in the middle of the day will go to the water. And I mean, when I say vultures, it could be any other bird as well. But the vultures often go and bathe in the heat of the day, and then they move to the bank. And because of how heavy their feathers are, the jackals sometimes catch the vultures because they can't really fly away, and which has been recorded. But I mean, with the geese, they have that oily layer, so most of the water just runs down. So when they need to go out of the water and fly, they are capable of doing that, even from the water. So maybe crocodiles would probably be their number one predator. Joseph, that's very, very interesting, but so like normally with ducks, they do lay the eggs either near the edge of the water or maybe even in a nest in the reeds, but with these ones, they actually nest in tree cavities and on top of old hammerkop nests. So hammerkop is it's like this brown bird and the head looks like a hammer, so they build these massive nests, and sometimes the knob-billed ducks will actually go nest on top of that. There's some red-billed buffalo weavers that are calling in the distance. You might be able to hear them. Yeah, I think we're looking at there, but now, but because of the cloud cover, it was bright like maybe 10 minutes ago, and suddenly there's cloud cover, so everything is so dark. We're struggling to see the shapes. But these are hippos that have just come out of the water now, and it might be. With the hippos here, it could be two younger bulls that are in this waterhole. Could be that it could be two females. We're not too sure. They've been under the water most of the time. And they don't look too big. So, I mean, you do get females that are bigger than this as well as bulls. But often with hippos in particular, they move to the water to rest up in the heat of the day, and when it cools down this evening, they'll move out of the water and start feeding. In some areas like Botswana, you'll get in some areas of the Kruger National Park, is where these hippos in the middle of the day will go out feeding on the tall grass, and eventually from there on move back into the water, or even go and sunbathe, like move onto a bank and just lie down in the sun for a little while before they head back into the water. And if they disappear like this, you can't see them. They could stay there for quite a while, up to 6 minutes, and then come up and breathe again and then move on. But I just love this waterhole so much. It's so quiet. There's a herd of impala in the back. Beautiful clouds rolling in. So I'm not too sure how often hippos mate. I'll have to try and find out. I'm sure it also probably depends on quite a lot of factors, but I'm not too sure about intervals at which I'm sure it'd probably be like, let's say with a female, probably every 2.5, maybe 3 years, based on the young and the size of the young. But it's something that I'm not too sure of, and I'll try and see if I can find out a little bit more about it. I wonder if this one's lying with his head on top of the other one's back. I don't know. One just came out behind him. Suffix with hippos, I mean, they're not really, like when you say opportunistic, is the like in regards to, I'm sure probably if they feed out of the water now, I mean, they don't eat any meat or they're just herbivores, so they mainly eat just grass. And so what they will do is in the middle of the night, or during the later part of the day, earlier into the evening, they'll move away from the water. And they'll move as far as 10 kilometers away from the water and feed, and eventually venture off back and get back to water before it starts getting too warm. But I mean, if there's grass around and if there's a lot of competition, of course they'll have that survival instinct where, let's say there's a lot of competition happening around the water and there's not really any food around, you'll find that the hippos would feed in the middle of the day, regardless if it's warm or not, just because of that competition. So in that way, they could be opportunistic, but I mean, they don't really hunt or eat anything other than grass. Just right over this hippo, there's a Egyptian goose with, I can't count how many goslings, so let's just try to see if we can find her. She's right about there. Let's all count together, because there are quite a few of them. And I'd love to know from the viewers how many do they count. I'm going to try and see if I can count as well. I counted 11. Now, I might have missed one as they were overlapping one another, so I'd love to hear from the viewers what do they think. can now count 12 goslings altogether. Lee, 9 babies and 2 adults. I just see the one adult there. Unless the other adult is now joined up at the back that I can see. But the youngsters, they start counting from the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Maybe I'm missing another one somewhere. Mark, you reckon 12 babies and 2 adults? I think that's also what I got. It's just hard to see at the moment because they are quite far off. That's the other thing we have to consider. But I do think there's 12 and then the 2 adults there. Yeah, I've just counted 12 again. But for now, while we enjoy this water hole and as it's warming up, let's head across to JP.
Good morning and welcome back to Tswalu. We just located on a breeding herd of oryx, also known as a gemsbok, and unfortunately they're just moving off. We're just going to see if we can reposition the vehicle and get a better view from them. It's always great to see these lovely large breeding herds. There's some really young individuals in between the group as well. It also seems if we've got a dispute between 2 of the members of the group. It's most likely a bull that tried to sneak in here. That's not being chased away by one of the more dominant individuals. We're just going to reposition and we're going to get a view back on them. And maybe we can get to show you how they're chasing one another. Oh, there we go. They're still going at it, and it seems that the one in the front is definitely just keeping ahead with them. And they're gone. Well, we're just going to repan back onto the breeding herd and look at what they're getting up to. Yes, they are absolutely amazing, and yeah, they're coming back again. I can't believe how fast they are, and this guy is doing his very best to try and just stay out of reach of those horns from that other male that's trying to get to him. So quite often they are actually known to kill and seriously injure one another with these horns when there are fights with regards to territories or females. Good morning, Joanne. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you to that question, but I will see if I can find out for you and then get back to you at a later show. They're pretty impressive in terms of the speed that they're already delivering. However, we do have a number of incredibly fast antelope species in South Africa, of which the Sabi is most likely the fastest. I've also been very impressed to see what speeds Springbok can achieve, especially if they're being chased by a potential predator such as a cheetah, and often outrunning the cheetahs as well. Unlike humans that like to expend energy when in the form of exercising, animals will generally try and conserve as much as possible energy. But for this moment, this guy has to exercise a little bit to just stay out of reach of that dominant male that would like to attack him. Good morning, Annie, and welcome to the show. Sometimes at a distance with great difficulty. However, there's a few tricks that we have. You can either look at the underbelly and you'll see the penis sheath breaking the outline of the belly, or you look for the udders or the female between the hind legs. Then if we look at the horns, we can look at longer, thinner horns for females, while males generally have shorter horns, which is thicker at the base, compared to those of the female, which is more continuous in terms of the thickness. And then generally males also have slightly wider horns than that the females have. Quite often we also will find that males are generally larger than females. However, there's always an exception to the rule where you sometimes do have a female that's much larger than a male in the group, and then incorrectly you might refer to it as a male. But looking closer and you suddenly discover that it is no scrotum, and you see the udders and start looking at the horn structure.
Thank you very much. So what we got here, it's one of the bird, it's actually a migration bird, where it's European roller. I know a lot of time we see like breasted rollers, plenty of time, but this is actually different to that. Not much, only that they don't have a lilac breast. So all you see on their throat is kind of like still bright colored bird, but on top it's kind of a gray taking place there. So this doesn't have a main of a color as lilac-breasted roller, where that lilac-breasted roller would have 7 different colors, where these probably 3 color, 4 color things somewhere there, including the back tail. It's slightly black, and then the fruit color that take place underneath, and the browning that is there, and then the throat, which is kind of a gray light as well. And the patching there, probably it's actually hunting methods right now, watching on the ground, any movement of insect. Some of these insects will be catched from flies, just like a bee eater and things like that, methods of hunting. Or they can go down in the ground, prey on whatever, grasshoppers, go back on its perch, kill it, swallow it. So I'm gonna check around, see if I find anything else.
So we found a very beautiful flower as we were making our way towards this open area to go and see if there's any chance of wild dogs this morning. But I'm going to try and keep it as still as possible as BK is going to move the camera a bit closer. But have a look at this beautiful flower. If you notice, like 5 petals around it, and it almost looks like they actually cross over one another like a fan. So this is referred to as the lion's eye. Now, often when you look for especially a flower like this, it's in a really rocky terrain. One area where there's a lot of granite, hard soil. And we were driving past and we saw quite a few of them. So normally this is the time of the year where we find this array of like lion's eyes around some of the cluster of trees. But it is a beautiful flower. For now, let's carry on. So just to show you the habitat where we are in, you'll notice there's a lot of combretum trees here, so those are the ones off to the right. As we go past, we might just point them out, and then also quite a few wattle trees. So the combretum trees are the bush willows sorry, I had to just turn around so the cable didn't hook. But I'll just point it out here to some of our viewers what I mean by combretum. Hopefully I can get one with the fruit. So all these trees are off to the right, actually part of the combretum family. Now combretum means a 4-winged fruit. So this tree has a fruit that has 4 wings on it. Maybe I can get one. Oh, here we go. Actually got one. I'm just going to move back a little bit and stop here. I'm just going to pick this fruit because it's going to be easier to show it from here. So I'll just hold my hand behind it. So that we can see it. But notice the 4 wings that this fruit has. So one of the reasons for that is, imagine now as this fruit, or as this drops to the ground, because of those 4 wings, it actually helps, especially if there's a bit of a wind, to disperse it. And that's one of the ways that this tree can be dispersed in different areas and doesn't just grow underneath the mother plant. But this tree in general makes a really nice tea. So a lot of people will actually boil this as well as the leaves and make like a nice African tea. I tried it before. It's not as nice as everyone says, but if you add honey to it, it's quite nice. As with anything that you add honey to. But what we're going to do now, you can see just in the distance there's a bit of clouds coming in. So we're going to check these open areas. Hopefully there's some signs of wild dogs that might have moved into the reserve. I'm hoping. We haven't seen any in quite a while, and we never know. Maybe today is our day. So I think for now, while we carry on, let's head across to some butterfly.
Now we've got some spots for you. Definitely not the same spots that we had earlier, but we have a monarch butterfly. One of the most iconic butterflies out here. And we had to leave Sabui, I'm afraid. I think Djuma went through another sort of internet glitch. So there were short sightings, the two of them, Chandi, Cub and Sabui, but at least we saw them all. Lots of spots for one drive. It's been a very busy morning, but I think we need some shade, so we've parked here and we're just admiring this monarch. Very iconic, so iconic that the common diadem tries to copy it. But if you'll notice, it's slightly tricky from this position, but when it opens its wings, the wings slope downwards. There's a gentle curve sloping downwards. Now with the diadem, they don't do that. They actually sort of slope upwards. The patterns are also slightly different. When you look closely, you can tell which species you're looking at. But the diadem is trying to be a mimic, is trying to pretend, hey everyone, I'm the monarch. Mimicry in the animal kingdom is wonderful, and it comes in all different shapes and sizes. Meaning even spots on the back of a fish, an eye spot, is a loose form of mimicry. You're trying to pretend that that's an eye, that's your eye, to confuse the predator. But actually it's just a spot. But this is called Batesian mimicry. And mimicry in general has sort of evolved as a survival strategy, if you like, against predators. So what I mean by Batesian mimicry is that the African monarch is unpalatable to all predators. They can't eat it. It contains toxins, which will probably not taste very nice, to be honest, but it definitely won't have a nice effect on the body. So what the common diadem's trying to do, or at least the female, is pretend that she is unpalatable. By pretending to look like the monarch, she's trying to say, hey, I'm also unpalatable, don't eat me, don't eat me. But actually, she's completely palatable and most likely delicious. So she's basically lying, pretending to be another species in order to give off the impression that she's actually unpalatable, but she's not. An excellent form of mimicry. And this type is called Batesian. There's a whole spectrum of mimicry in the animal kingdom, ranging through all categories of animals, and there's different types, and they've all got different names. But you can see the body of this monarch. It's very, very spotty. So we've still got spots in some shape. Just slightly different and more legs than we had earlier. Now, an example of another type of mimicry is the Mullerian mimicry. Ashley, it's such a wonderful colour palette. I agree. The sort of bright, almost an amber colour in contrast with the black and the white. Stunning. They really stand out here. You can spot a monarch or a diadem quite far away. So just going back to the Mullerian mimicry, what's happening here, it's different, is that all the species are actually unpalatable. No one's lying, no one's pretending to be unpalatable, because in fact they all are. But in order to dilute yourself and to ensure your survival, what you're trying to do is ensure that all the species that are unpalatable look the same. So just like impala, it's a dilution effect in the herd. You join a big herd, you're diluting yourself. You're ensuring that you're the one that's not picked off by the predator. It's sort of similar to that. By looking the same as all the other unpalatable species, you're reducing the chance that it's you that's plucked off. Instead of all having separate colours and separate patterns, you all look the same. So the predator knows, they're all unpalatable. I'm not going to eat them. Whereas if they all look different, then of course the predator may recognise one species as being unpalatable, but may not recognise the other. So it benefits them all just to look the same. And a really great example is the African monarch right here, and even the white-barred acria. They do look slightly similar, and they're both unpalatable. Also the wanderer and the dusky acria. What a drive with spots. We are going to bumble closer to home, and we're going to send you guys down to JP.
Good morning and welcome back to Tswalu. We just located on one of the millipede species. Locally in South Africa, we also refer to them as shongololos. What I find particularly fascinating about this group of joint-legged organisms is that they've been around for almost 450 million years, and they've virtually gone unchanged in their morphology. Some of the ancient forms were up to 2 meters in length. However, some of the longest probably reaches between 20 and 30 centimeters, which is currently alive. As the name millipede implies, it implies that they actually have got 1,000 legs, which is not true, as the record amount of legs that they can have is roughly 710. So one of the things that I do find quite interesting about them as a group of arthropods, and some characteristics that they share with certain marine species such as crabs and crayfish, is that they can actually deposit calcium. And these calcium deposits is there to strengthen the segments between the body. We also quite often find that when they do go under a molting process where they outgrow their shell, they have to go and hide themselves for a period of 2 to 3 weeks to get the shell to regrow. What they also have found in certain studies is that they re-eat the shell to obtain calcium. So in general, if you might wonder why they wander around like this in the middle of day, they do have quite a large number of strategies to protect themselves. One is wriggling like a snake, and the second is rolling themselves up into a protective ball. And if the predator still continues to mess with them, they can release prussic acid and cyanide gases. They reckon that an ant that would come within 8 centimeters of a millipede can potentially be killed by this incredibly potent gas. Some field researchers, which also collect insects, will quite often use millipedes by putting them in a bottle to kill the specimens. And they reckon it's far more effective than having to use toxins to kill the specimens, which they would like to study later on. So quite often, millipedes are confused with centipedes, and I'm just going to show you the difference over here. This is a centipede over here. So a few of the differences which we can see as the number of feet per segment. We can also see that they are more flattened in their appearance, and then they've also got a ferocious pair of biting mechanisms in the front, which can deliver quite a painful bite. We also find that they can inject a venom into the body of their prey. I've actually seen quite a few of the centipedes fighting with one of the most dangerous scorpions in South Africa, especially in the Low-Veld region of South Africa. I've seen these guys taking on the Transvaal thick-tailed scorpion, which is regarded as one of the 3 most venomous scorpions in South Africa. Some of the other ways that centipedes and millipedes differ is that centipedes are carnivorous, while the millipede feeds on dead plant material. There's a few animals that do feed on millipedes, and especially in the eastern half of South Africa, we often find that they are consumed by the African civet. In the meanwhile, we're going to hand you back to Andrew, who's currently viewing a waterbuck.
Thanks, JP. Here we got a very interesting antelope as a waterbuck, a male, beautiful ram that looks like he goes to shed to shed, but he's actually checking around here a lot. Actually wanted to spend enough time with him just to see why he's running around a bit. This kind of aggression, it's not a normal. It's when they're threatened or not sure what's happening around them. It's quite actually nice and open here, where he's probably uncomfortable with an area. They're very good on sense of smell, though, and they can able to smell things from far away. He's still actually trying to move off the area, because the minute they don't trust them, especially those are isolated already on just a lone male or female animal individual, especially the older easy prey, or if it's anything happening here, we're just gonna run off. So it's basically running and stop, which is, we'll see what can happen. Actually, we're not in that position of where that leopard tracks was seen, but you never know. They actually have a lot of movement as a leopards. But I can guarantee you that there was no report of lion tracks, anything around here. So whatever would threaten him, it would be maybe a leopard, maybe other bull that usually, it will be visible if there's another male, because they can push one another for their own territory movement. So everyone, we're coming in end of this morning show, and we all just wish you all great day and Happy New Year from wherever you are. Until this afternoon, we see you in Central African Time, 1600. Goodbye from us.